make somebody happy.
This is the story really of how the musician Santana brought Helen and I together, right?
Right, Santana.
Our friendship goes back almost 50 years. Robert and Helen, Bob and Hazel, we were ministry friends.
Yes, we
and
were.
We preached
Had so
in
many
your
friends.
churches and shared missions in your churches. And then 7 years ago, after 50 years of marriage, Helen lost Robert. And a little over 2 years ago, after 56 years of marriage, Hazel was called home. And for me, it was a horrible time of pain. Hazel once wrote a poem that said, "Deep grief is evidence of deep love." And that's what I felt. I'd loved so deeply that I felt I couldn't live. I actually prayed to die. And then I was a fan of Santana, so I knew that Santana was going to be, and I knew that Helen and Robert previously had gotten us some good tickets. So I sent a text message and asked if you could get me tickets to Santana, right?
And I checked with the person that had always done that for us, and because of changes in management with the MGM Corporation, that no longer existed. So I had to respond and say, no, I can't get tickets like that anymore.
So I'm texting back to say, thank you anyway, I appreciate your attempt to help me. And when I went to hit the send button, I hit instead the call button, and I looked down in panic to see calling Helen Gorey, and I thought, what am I going to say to Helen Gorey? And then suddenly she's saying hello, and I said, well, hello, Sister Gorey.
And I said, this is Helen.
And she asked about how I was dealing with Hazel's death, and she asked about her last days, and I said, well, interestingly enough, the last thing that she did was watch the NBA championship game between Cleveland and Oakland, and then that's when you jumped in, right?
Right, because finding out later that Hazel and I shared the same sentiments about Steph Curry. He was our favorite NBA player.
And so we started texting about the sports, and then we moved to other subjects.
Soccer.
And then she began to follow my travels in Africa. And
most of our correspondence was on Messenger.
And then when I got my dates for the Santana concert, I said, how would you like to join me for dinner and the concert? And our first date was with Santana. And we realized that God was doing something very special. Actually, Helen had been involved with One Hope over all the years.
Many years. In 1997, I heard about One Hope and was so inspired by the ministry that I took 8 different teams around the world to pass out the Book of Hope and to be in ministry with One Hope.
So we had a lot in common, a lot to share, and after our first date, we realized that God was doing something special.
And at that point, I went and talked to my pastor then, who was my son-in-law, and I said, Tom, what do I do with these feelings that I'm having for Bob? And he said, well, Helen, I've been concerned about you about 3 years ago because you had just closed off that emotion. And he said, God made us for relationships. And he said, you are a widow, and Bob is a widower. And if God would so choose and you want to marry, it would be fine.
So then you shared with Robin that we were even talking about maybe next year or sometime we might get married.
And Robin said, Mom,
Bob's 81, you're 75, you can't wait till next year. Elope, go get married now.
And we thought about that, but we thought it best to plan a time.
And include the family. So
yes.
It was in December in the beautiful
Aria
that
Hotel.
with just our family. We were married and set right off on our missionary journey. Over the first 9 months of this year, we've traveled over 150,000 miles to 20 countries. And I guess the message is for us, God's love is infinite.
Yes.
We still love Robert. We love
Yes,
Hazel.
we do.
talk about them. We
All
share
the
stories
time.
about them all the time.
It's our history.
So it's not a replacement love.
It's new.
It's a new love.
It's so new.
And that showed us that God is so infinite. He says, hey, you loved Hazel, you loved Robert, but there's more love. And I'm going to let you share some of it. And that's what he's done. And I have a very deep sensitivity now for those who lose a spouse.
Yes.
And I try to send them a message and say, you probably aren't ready to hear this now. Hazel said, deep love creates deep grief. And so I say, you're probably not ready to hear it now, but God has more love than you ever dreamed of. And so be open. Be open if God wants to bring new love into your life. And we're already finding that some are.
Yes.
They're taking that message.
Yes. And the One Hope family has been so wonderful to accept me, because Hazel was so loved by the One Hope family, that they have opened their arms and their hearts to me, and I'm so thankful for that. And my children love Bob. They think he's the greatest. And I'm accepted by his children. It's wonderful.
And the same is true of my
Same
children.
yeah.
They can't thank Helen enough, because they saw how deeply hurt I was and how deep my grief was. And to see, it's like everybody says, oh, Helen's given Bob a new life. And it's true.
Love you.
I love you, baby.